Two best friends, the meticulously organized Katie and spontaneous Sloan, are eagerly anticipating their upcoming getaway. They're embarking on a month-long work assignment at Eco-Field Organic Farms, a means to an end, saving enough money for a lavish shopping spree in New York City. The film opens with them preparing for the trip. The next morning, Katie's uncle, Jason, a police officer, picks them up. They'll be staying overnight at Jason's place with his girlfriend before he drives them to the farm the following day. As they settle into their temporary accommodations, Sloan, always the one for a bit of fun, suggests they invent fake names for their time in the small town. Sloan chooses Heather, while Katie opts for Ripley. The next day, Uncle Jason drops the two off at the bus station, from where they will catch a bus to the farm. A protective uncle, Jason gives them strict instructions. They must come up with a safe word to use in their daily text message exchanges, just in case they find themselves in any trouble. Each day, Katie is to send him a different code word, progressing alphabetically. Today's safe word is apple. After the uncle departs, Katie and Sloan find themselves with an hour to kill before the bus arrives. They decide to grab a coffee at a nearby cafe. They quickly attract the attention of two local men and end up sharing a table with them. The women introduce themselves using their newly created aliases, while the two men reveal themselves to be brothers named Jed and Lucas. The brothers offer to give them a ride directly to the farm, an offer that Katie initially declines, but after a silent, persuasive look from Sloan, she reluctantly agrees. They climb into the brothers' old blue truck, and the journey begins, but not as expected. Jed deliberately drives past the turnoff for the farm, causing confusion and a growing sense of unease for the two women. They eventually arrive at a remote, rundown house. Jed and Lucas's creepy mother greets them at the door, inviting them in for tea before they supposedly continue on to the farm. Inside the house, Katie receives a text message from her uncle. Using the agreed-upon safe word, she replies, "Apple," attempting to reassure him that everything is all right, despite her growing unease. They share some pie and tea with the mother, a seemingly innocent gesture that soon turns sinister. Their vision begins to blur, and they realize that something has been added to their drinks. Panic sets in as they understand they've been drugged. They make a desperate attempt to escape, but Jed and Lucas are too quick. They grab the women, overpower them, and drag them back into the house. The next day, Katie and Sloan wake up to a terrifying reality. They are chained and bound in the middle of a dense, isolated section of woods. Jed approaches them and coldly informs them that this is their new life, that they will be living here from now on. They are given minimal provisions for survival, some clothes, a bed, and a makeshift toilet. Shortly after, a man named Boris arrives. He seems to be in charge. Boris takes Katie's phone, ostensibly to check if anyone has been trying to contact them. It's then that he discovers their fake names and the already compromised code word, apple. Katie and Sloan are forced to confess the true meaning of the word. Just as the situation seems to be at its worst, the town's sheriff arrives. He is not there to rescue them. He is a corrupt, morally repugnant man who is part of the same criminal operation. He proceeds to sexually assault one of the women. Elsewhere, Uncle Jason is becoming increasingly worried. He has received another text from Katie containing the same code word, apple. He knows something is terribly wrong. He calls the farm only to discover that Katie and Sloan never arrived for their work assignment. His fears are confirmed. Back in the woods, Jed and Lucas bring in another victim, a disheveled man who will be referred to as Scruffy Guy. Scruffy Guy takes Sloan into a nearby trailer. The implications are clear and disturbing. Later, a new customer arrives. This one is even more unsettling than Scruffy Guy, a man wearing a grotesque pig mask. He also takes Sloan into the trailer. She emerges even more traumatized than before. Uncle Jason, who we now learn is actually an FBI agent, goes to the sheriff's office. He confronts the sheriff, explaining his concerns and mentioning the repeated code word. The sheriff, who is complicit in the kidnappings, immediately alerts Boris. Boris, worried about the FBI's involvement, orders Jed to kill Katie and Sloan and dispose of their bodies. Unbeknownst to them, Katie overhears their conversation, learning of their impending execution. Meanwhile, Uncle Jason continues his investigation. He visits the cafe where he last saw Katie and Sloan. He questions the barista, who vividly remembers the two women leaving with Jed and Lucas in the blue truck. The barista is able to provide a description of the truck. The next day, Katie informs Sloan of the kidnappers' plan. Shortly after, Jed and Lucas arrive, bringing Scruffy Guy with them. They leave Scruffy Guy to guard Katie and Sloan. Katie sees an opportunity. She uses her charm and apparent vulnerability to seduce Scruffy Guy. Once she is close enough, she viciously attacks him, tearing at his throat with her teeth. Sloan joins in the fight, and they manage to overpower Scruffy Guy. They free themselves from their restraints. Not long after, the sheriff arrives, presumably to carry out the execution order. But as he steps out of his car, Katie and Sloan speed away in the stolen vehicle, the sheriff's own car. They drive back into town, stopping at a hardware store to gather supplies. They're preparing for a fight. They ask the cashier if he knows Boris and his blue truck, and the cashier provides them with Boris's address. At the same time, Uncle Jason is at the town's car insurance office. He concocts a story about a minor collision with a blue truck and asks for the owner's information. Boris arrives home, unaware of the danger that awaits him. Katie and Sloan have already snuck into his house. They ambush him, throwing nail-spiked tennis balls at him, severely injuring him. Now that the tables have turned, Boris begs for his life, offering the money in exchange for their mercy. Just then, Uncle Jason arrives at Boris's house. Inside, Katie and Sloan interrogate Boris, demanding to know the identity of the man in the pig mask. Boris refuses to cooperate. In a fit of rage, Katie and Sloan use a makeshift spear they've created, brutally killing Boris. When Uncle Jason finally enters the house, Katie and Sloan are gone. He finds Boris's body. He hears the sound of car engines outside. He rushes out, just in time to see Katie and Sloan driving away. He gets Boris into his car and races to the hospital. The next scene shows the sheriff informing Uncle Jason that Boris did not survive. Jason's worry intensifies. He tries calling Katie's phone, but the sheriff intercepts the call. Realizing his cover is blown, the sheriff pulls out his gun, revealing his true, corrupt nature. Meanwhile, Katie and Sloan arrive at a church. They've tracked down the pig mask man. He is the town's priest. Sloan enters the church and confronts her rapist. With Katie's help, they subdue and kill the priest. As they drive away, they seem relieved and even a little carefree. But when they stop the car and get out, it's revealed that the priest, still alive but bound and gagged, is chained to the back of their truck. In a final act of vengeance, they douse him with gasoline and set him on fire before driving off. While Katie and Sloan appear to be thriving, Uncle Jason is now held captive by the sheriff. Even worse, the sheriff has captured two more young women, presumably to suffer the same fate as Katie and Sloan. But Katie and Sloan return, rescuing the women and taking the sheriff hostage. They tie him up and subject him to a terrifying game of Russian roulette, torturing him both physically and psychologically. They are clearly unhinged by their experiences, but perhaps understandably so. The sheriff begs for mercy, but Katie silences him with a final, brutal blow to the head. Katie and Sloan free the other women and instruct them to release Uncle Jason. Jason asks the women who killed the sheriff, but they refuse to answer, their silence a testament to their gratitude and a sign of their understanding that Katie and Sloan are not to be trifled with. Next, Katie and Sloan pay a visit to Jed and Lucas's mother. They drug her in the same way she drugged them, then tie her up and take her to the basement, where Jed is also bound and gagged. They brutally beat Jed to death with baseball bats while his mother is forced to watch. They then take her to Lucas, who is tied to a chair. Instead of killing him outright, they untie him, hand him a bat, and order him to beat his own mother to death. When Lucas refuses, they shoot him dead. They then stage the scene to make it appear as though Lucas killed his mother and then committed suicide. Jed and Lucas's mother, desperate to save her own life, offers them money. Instead of showing mercy, Katie grabs a lawnmower and mercilessly kills her. In the next scene, some time has passed. Uncle Jason arrives at Katie's house to pick up both her and Sloan. Before long, they're dropped off at the airport, eager and ready for their trip to New York City.